Welcome to Out with Dan, the podcast that spotlights and examines the voices of LGBTQ+ authors, characters, and our allies. Together, we lift our voices and we tell our stories. I'm Dan White. Join me as I chat with this week's author. Hello and welcome back to Out with Dan. Today I'm excited to talk to New York Times bestseller Laura Lippman about Murder Takes a Vacation. Laura is the wildly popular author of the Tess Monaghan series and more than a dozen standalone books. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you for having me. This is a pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so excited about this. I told Laura before we started recording that I'm going to be a little goofy with her. So I think you've had Tess Monaghan following me, trailing me, because there's so many things in this book that I'm like, oh, my stars, that's just like me. Oh, my stars, that's just like me. We'll start with one. One character's name is Danny. And if you look at his driver's license, his name is Danny. That's actually my real name. It's not Daniel, it's Danny. And I'm like, look at Laura following me around. I love that.
That's a pretty great coincidence.
It really was. So, Laura, will you give the audience an overview of what Murder Takes a Vacation is about?
Sure. Murder Takes a Vacation is what we would call a classic cozy crime novel in which a woman named Mrs. Blossom, who's come into some money, decides to take her dream vacation. She's a widow and she's feeling a little bit lost. Her husband's been gone 10 years and she's sort of thrown herself into caring for her grandchildren. And now her family's moving and they don't really need her anymore and she can't go with them. So she's at a crossroads, to use the cliche. She's starting over. She comes into some money and she's like, well, I'm going to put together my dream vacation and go to Paris and then take a cruise up the Seine. And I'll bring along my best friend from childhood. And from the beginning, things go wrong. Things go wrong and things go right. You know, she meets a very attractive man who seems to be interested in her. And then suddenly he's dead. And people are wondering if that's connected to her. And her rooms get searched and someone tries to steal her purse and she's being followed. And all of this seems to have something to do with a statue, a Pakistani antiquity of a bird. And she's like, I obviously don't have a statue in my luggage. What are you people talking about? And there are people who are not what they seem, whose stories keep changing. And at the same time, it's also a story about a woman in her 60s making peace with some mistakes she made in the past and deciding that she should not see the life ahead of her as one that's narrowing. If anything, she should decide to be more of the main character in her own life.
I love that. And I think one of the things that Mrs. Blossom says in the book, and I also wanted to bring up a little bit of my childhood as well, because, you know, it's all about me, Laura, so I can't help myself. So when I was a little boy, my mom always said, you have to put a handle on someone's name. So no one older than me was ever Laura. It was Miss Laura or Mrs. Laura or whatever that, or Mr. Lippman, whatever it was always someone with a handle. So when you bring in Mrs. Blossom, I just loved that because I realized, you know, we, in our day of getting familiar with everyone, we forget that there's a bit of respect we give people when we call them Mrs. Blossom, call them by their last name. We give them a little bit of respect and elevation. And I was struck early on in the book about that. What came to me was, well, Mrs. Blossom is trying to make herself the star of her own show, but yet she also lets people know where she is in her stage of life because she is Mrs. Blossom, something she liked being for many, many years. And I loved that because I then found as a character, I respected Mrs. Blossom and her opinions early on. Was that something you set out to do intentionally, or was it just something cute that happened?
Some characters show up and they tell you what they're all about. I don't mean to make it sound like woo-woo and I'm still in charge, but Mrs. Blossom is always Mrs. Blossom. And I'd written about her before as a secondary character. So it was with this book that I realized Mrs. Blossom likes being Mrs. Blossom because it reminds her of her late beloved husband, Harold Blossom. She didn't have a very happy childhood. So taking on her husband's name when she married quite young was one of the things that really helped liberate her in a sense. She loves being Mrs. Blossom. And as someone who sometimes doesn't feel respected, I mean, she's either invisible or when she is seen, she's somehow diminished or not taken seriously. You know, Mrs. Blossom at least affords her a little bit of respect. There's something kind of proper about her. You know, she's well-mannered. She's not a prude.
No.
Definitely not a prude, but she
Mm-mm.
is someone who values kindness and good manners. You know, she's a rule follower. She wants to do things correctly. And so all of those things together just add up to almost everybody calls her Mrs. Blossom. And, you know, with a few exceptions, her husband would have been one of those exceptions. Her oldest friend, who's known her since grade school, wouldn't call her that because she knew her before she was Mrs. Blossom. And it just captures her character. She is Mrs. Blossom.
And she also owns her lane, which is something that was very refreshing to me. I do think some of the things that Mrs. Blossom notices and talks about in your book, I think is true. I do think sometimes as people age, they do become a little more invisible. And we were talking before we started recording, you know, youth always has its place because we've all been there before. When you get to a certain age, I know that Mrs. Blossom says about her best friend Eleanor, who is looking at herself in the mirror, and Mrs. Blossom is watching Eleanor look at herself in the mirror. And Mrs. Blossom sort of says, you know, I've known her at every stage of her life, you know, from the time she was a little girl to the time she was in her 20s. And as she too is in her 60s now, and Mrs. Blossom has been able to see that transformation that happens in her friend. And I think one of the things that I think we humans have to do is look in the mirror and see our own transformation. So I felt like this book was a bit of maybe looking back. Did you mean it to be that way, or is it Mrs. Blossom led the way?
No, I did mean it that way. Eleanor and Mrs. Blossom are a bit of a contrast because where Mrs. Blossom has been a widow for 10 years and hasn't really shown much interest in dating or marrying again, Eleanor just feels incomplete without a man. And she's been married 3 times and, you know, she's determined to have a shipboard romance. And so in that scene, I'm so glad you mentioned it, Eleanor is kind of inspecting her face sorrowfully. She's seeing the youth that is no longer there. And Mrs. Blossom wishes that she could show her friend that it's actually a better face because it's her life. This is your, like, you wear your life on your face. I just wrote a piece for the online Substack Oldster about the fact that I take a lot of selfies and I have found that they are as good as journal entries for helping me kind of track where I've been at certain points in my
Oh,
life.
yes.
And, you know, I feel like it's almost subversive as an older person to like your face because capitalism really wants you not to like your face because they got a bunch of stuff to sell you if you don't like your face. And if you like your face, there's just not much they can do for you. So I did this kind of, I was like, I was looking at my selfies because I was trying to figure out the history of a blemish on my nose that came and went without over 7 years. And when I looked at these photos that happened to correspond with what would also be the last 6 years of my marriage, I was like, oh, you're miserable. You are so sad. Look at you, even if you're smiling. And so I would like it if everybody could see the mirror as a positive experience, that it's when you look at your reflection as you age, you shouldn't be thinking about what you used to look like or what has changed, but just of your face is a record of all of the experience and wisdom you've accrued. And, you know, again, I think it's subversive for a woman my age to be like, you know, I kind of like my face. And I like, you know, I love to tell people it's a joke, and yet the minute I say it, everyone's like, oh my God, that's so true. I am a dead ringer for Sweet Polly purebred on Underdog. It's like, especially in profile when I'm wearing my hair down, it's so funny. And, so it's not like I'm staring in the mirror like, oh my God, I'm just such a beautiful siren. It's like, this is me. And if I don't like me, who will? And so, yeah, Mrs. Blossom gets that. And Eleanor needs to learn that.
I think that was something that it really did strike a chord with me, Laura, because what I saw was someone who was content being alone if necessary. Mrs. Blossom gets struck a really harsh deal when her son-in-law Trout says, I'm moving your daughter and me and our children to Japan, and basically you're not invited. And I thought to myself, they have Trout and the daughter and the two daughters, they have a life to live. They've got something to do. And I do like the fact that while Mrs. Blossom's feelings were hurt, she didn't wallow in self-pity. She said, okay, fine, I'm not happy about this, but fortunately I had come into a little money. So if I can only go to Japan once or twice a year, I'm going to make that happen. I love that tenacity in her in saying that, okay, I'm not happy, I feel down, but yet I'm going to make the best out of what I have.
And she begins to see that she really has a lot. And we're not just talking about her bank account.
Yes.
That just because you're 68 years old, it doesn't mean you're not going to form new relationships, whether they're friendships or romances. And I don't think it's a spoiler to say that this is a story where romance is fine, romance is good, but friendship is what really matters.
Sure. I agree. And I think that what we see at the end of the book, which I won't give away a spoiler again, but what we see at the end of the book, she's formed a new friendship out of someone that we would say is really they're very different. But yet in a lot of ways, they have so many similarities. I mean, they're both very tenacious people, and they say, okay, I have a problem and I'm going to see it through to the end. And I liked that. And I liked that difference in the two of them. And them being Mrs. Blossom and Danny, that's not giving anything away. But it's
I don't think
cute.
it is.
I just think it's really cute. And I love, it happens to me often. This is yet another similarity. I actually can travel to New York and see a same person on a street corner 3 different times while I'm on a trip to New York, in different places, in different outfits, on different days. I tend to run in a pack. That has been my life. My whole life has been that way. I run into people that they say, oh, my stars, I know you from blah, blah, blah. And it's in the most odd places on earth. And so that type of thing where Mrs. Blossom and Danny keep running into each other, whether it's intentional or unintentional, is something that happens to me often. And I look at that and I always say, because I'm a little bit of a spiritualist, the universe is trying to tell me something and I need to keep my eyes open. Whatever that something is, it is there to be told or unfolded. So I love that part of their relationship.
Unfolded is a big word in Mrs. Blossom's world. There's a lot of things, literal and figurative, that need to be unfolded in her world. And, this book is very personal for me because I basically drew on 3 different women. One of them was my mother, who just had such a great life and lived independently and loved to travel. And if anything, I wish she would have traveled more. When I saw her estate, I was like, Mom, you should have spent a little more money on yourself. You could have had a lot more trips. There's my sister, who is a lot like Mrs. Blossom in that as a teenager, she had the avant-garde taste in music. She was going to clubs in Baltimore and listening to bands that no one else had ever heard of. She's in assisted living now because of Parkinson's, but she's shy, she's timid, she's not very worldly. She doesn't, like, my sister is someone who's probably, per the first line of the book, never been upgraded in her life because it has been a life that just doesn't lend itself to upgrades. She doesn't travel, she doesn't go to hotels. And the third person that inspired Mrs. Blossom was myself, in that I'm 66 years old. And if you had asked me 10 years ago, where are you going to be when you're 66? I would have said, oh, well, my kid will be in high school. I hope that my husband and I will have figured out a way that he doesn't have to work out of town so much, because that's really been a stressor. And, we'll be sort of getting ready to be empty nesters. And instead, marriage broke up 5 years ago. And it was like right a month before COVID started. That was really
Oh
interesting
my
timing.
good heavens.
And, my husband was the one who decided he didn't want to be married anymore. Although I think, he was just making the right call, that we just were not happy together. And, it's COVID. My spouse of 20 years has just left me. And so at first, there's sort of this like heteronormative panic of, oh my God, I guess I better go meet another man. That's what would I be like? This was my second husband. This was my second marriage, but I had spent most of my adult life married. And it's like, oh, well, I have to, and then it was, once I kind of got past that, I was like, well, wait a minute, do you? And people laugh at me when I say this, but one of the big reasons I just walked away from, people were like, oh, you have to be on dating apps, you have to do this, you have to do that. And I walked away from all of it because I realized I had no desire to marry again or cohabitate. And most of the men my age, that's what they want. That's what they're in the market for. They're looking for someone to take care of them. And at the time I was like, it's like, I got a teenage daughter. I got a sister in assisted living. Up until last September, I had a mother in continuing care. I'm taking care of enough people. Okay. I don't need to add anyone to the roster. And, so that informed Mrs. Blossom as well. This idea of, I think Mrs. Blossom is more romantic than I am, and certainly more open to it. I think this sounds so weird when you're talking about your own character. Mrs. Blossom is sexy. I wouldn't say that about myself, but I will absolutely say it about her, that she's just got that kind of indefinable, like, if she's your type, she's your type. And yep. I think men are drawn to her. Certain men are drawn to her. They're like, probably because they do sense that she would also just take incredible care of you. Can you imagine? Mrs. Blossom would be the number one, like, best me. She would be, because she's just good at that. She is a caretaker. So yeah, she's an amalgam of the three Lippman women.
I love that. I love that. And there's so much introspection in this book. And that was something that came through very clearly. And what I love, once again, to point out what I think is so important, is it's not a Debbie Downer. It's just the opposite. It's so positive and so full of hope. And I did love one thing, because Mrs. Blossom said the same thing my mom said one time. She had been divorced for a while. And I said to her, do you ever get lonely? Do you want someone else? And my mom said, son, I'm a woman. If I wanted somebody, they would be here. That's the way women are built. All they have to say is yes, and one appears. It's the way of the universe. She said, but I don't feel like taking care of any old man. Yeah, I just don't want that. And I agree with you. I think that men are looking for a caregiver towards the end of their life, because I think men are often much more frightened than women about loneliness or being alone.
I am never lonely. I really am not. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens when I become a proper empty nester. Right now, I have a teenage daughter, and I have a fully 50-50 care schedule with my ex, and we're very good co-parents. We get along well. We're very collegial. And the weeks she's not with me, it's like, it's like Sunday night, like, woo, by myself, don't have to cook. And then it's like, well, I miss her. And then, like, right around Saturday, it's like, oh, wow, good thing she's coming home tomorrow, because I don't know if I could keep just taking care of myself. But I'm never lonely, though. Loneliness is just not something. I think part of that is having always been this weird little kid who was always telling myself stories and playing with my stuffed animals and my dolls, and everything is a story. So there are always books to read. And walks to take, and I love cooking for myself. I'm really good at it. I mean, like, I also, I mean, I love exercising. That is one of my favorite things to do. And I now, over the past, I've been working out with the same trainer. It's over 17 years now, I think.
Wow.
Because he was at my 50th birthday party, so we were already close enough that he showed up at my 50th birthday. And then during COVID, he was like, I'm going to drop my rates, and you could, maybe go up to 3 times a week, because we're doing it by Zoom. So I'm exercising. I'm doing strength training 3 times a week, and I do aerobic training 2 times a week, and I try to walk 5 miles every day. And I'm a big old weirdo, because this just gives me so much joy. Like, I was in my workout yesterday, and I was doing bicep curls, and I was like, I just don't understand people who don't love doing that.
Well, you certainly have a very active life, if nothing else, except exercising. I mean, no one's going to ever accuse you of sitting still. That's for sure.
I'm not very good at that.
Neither am I. So now let's talk about where you live a little bit. So Baltimore is one of my favorite cities for a lot of different reasons. I think there's just about everything that you could find to eat in Los Angeles, you can definitely find in Baltimore, and maybe even more of it, because there's a lot of what I would call ethnic areas or neighborhoods, and you get people who come in and they want to stay there. So besides Charleston, which is on the Inner Harbor, which is one of the greatest dining experience of my life.
And Cindy Wolf just got a James Beard Award last night.
Oh
After
my God.
24 nominations, she finally won. It's a great thing.
Oh, that is a great thing, because she is so magical in the kitchen. I mean, it is beyond ridiculous what this woman can create. Yeah. But now I want to talk about the joints. So where would Laura Lippman go to eat or to drink, if you drink, in Baltimore? Drink. So, because I went down at Fells Point, I went to Rye when I was there a couple of weekends ago. And it's a cute little hole-in-the-wall bar, which was so fun. They had live music, just adorable. But I've had some really great meals and drinks in Baltimore. Where would Laura go if she was going to a neighborhood joint?
I do just have to say one thing. I love my hometown of Baltimore. I'm so happy here. But my stepson lived in Los Angeles for a time, and I don't know, that city culinarily is pretty extraordinary. So in Baltimore, there's a hotel called the Ulysses, which just has a beautiful little jewel box of a bar. It looks, it's deep reds and velvets, and you can get a little food and, wonderful drinks there. That's the place I like to sneak into. Oh my God, the name of a place just flew out of my head. Oh, I got it. Comptoir de Vin, which is the place where Mrs. Blossom goes at the end of the book. That's a very real place. It is fantastic.
Oh, wow.
I am devoted to the neighborhood pizza place, which is called Hirsch's. And there's a neighborhood bar that I don't go to often enough. I'm going to go tonight after my book launch. It is a block from my house, and it is just sort of the perfect combination of dive bar, but the drinks are elevated. I don't know. I went into a true dive bar over the weekend. I'd gone to the No Kings protest. I was with a friend. We went into an East Baltimore bar. That was just, my friend wanted a gin and tonic, and he didn't have enough gin to make her one. So he gave her a tonic and gin, I guess you would call it, and said, I won't charge you for that. It was just really bare bones. I was like, I couldn't figure it out. It's like, I don't understand the business model here. But my local bar is called the Idle Hour, and it's pretty fantastic. We're really lucky to have it. You mentioned Charleston. It's part of a restaurant group that is run by Cindy Wolf, a chef, and her former husband, Tony Foreman, who's an incredible sommelier. And Charleston is Cindy's baby, and she kind of tends to that, and Tony tends to the rest of the empire, which is ever growing. So my favorite place of their places is Shingali, their Italian restaurant. I love to go there and sit at the bar and eat. my family was at Petite Louis Sunday night for Father's Day. That's like their French bistro place. Okay, so I will tell you that eating out in Baltimore is a little bit political. And a lot of the restaurants are owned by a company that is also affiliated with Sinclair Broadcasting, which, makes its money through some, I don't want to offend anyone. I'm not trying to be controversial, but a lot of us prefer not to give our restaurant dollars to a restaurant group that is basically funded by right-wing propaganda. I don't know else how to say it.
No,
Since
I agree I hear you.
I have a friend who's absolute on it, like never, ever, ever, not a single place, not a single bite. My ex-husband's more loosey-goosey about it, and I try not to, but there's a Mexican place inside the Four Seasons, and every time I'm just like, I just really want those tacos. And it's like near the movies where I go can I go to the movies by myself all the time? That's a big thing. I mean, Mrs. Blossom does that in the book as well. And
Yep.
She goes to one of my favorite movie theaters, but I also go to the movies over what we call Harbor East. So, eating out in Baltimore. Oh, one of the best places in Baltimore, totally independent. And it's so good. And yet sometimes I forget to go because it used to be almost impossible to get in and there were no reservations, but that's changed. There's a place called Peter's Inn.
Okay.
And Peter's Inn, I don't know if it's still true, for a long time. Basically, John Waters, the film director, there was a point in time when only John was allowed to have a reserved table at Peter's Inn. And it's a pretty divine place. I forget to go. I have to remember to. I need to get over there. I just walked by it the other day. I was like, why am I not going to Peter's Inn? What is wrong with me?
Well, I love this because this has given me ideas, and I also now know where not to go because I did have 2 Cosmos there 2 weeks ago. So, oopsie. But I also remember when it was Michael Mina's restaurant. So
I do too. It was so good.
It was so good. And so to give you an idea of how much I do love Baltimore, for my 50th birthday, I did a 10-day trip from New York to Washington, D.C. And I purposefully woke up the morning of my 50th birthday at the Four Seasons in Baltimore on purpose because I love Baltimore that much. I'm like, this is what I have to do for myself. And people join me at every venture for those 10 days, except for the morning of my 50th birthday. I decided to be on my own, which is what I wanted. And it was heavenly. It really was.
I mean, I love the Four Seasons. My daughter adores the Four Seasons, and we've done the occasional staycation. There's also a gorgeous hotel called the Ivy, where every room is different. It's in an interesting part of town known as Midtown. So there's not a lot around it, and it has its own restaurant, Magdalena. I adore my hometown, and I do feel like I'm sort of always on call as an ambassador to Baltimore.
Well, that's a good thing. It's a good thing to be. And it is really great that you do like your hometown because it makes it much easier to sell. Because if you were from Los Angeles and you didn't like Los Angeles, you'd be like, oh, I wouldn't waste my time. But you like it there, and for good, bad, or indifferent, I've been here 25 years. I guess it's sort of grown on me here in Los Angeles. So
when I got to see Los Angeles through my stepson's eyes, I really liked it. I liked his view of Los Angeles. He lived in, he lived in the part of Hollywood that's very near Silver Lake.
Okay.
And my stepson, he knows how to find the best restaurants. Every time we visited, the food we had was just amazing. So I like that. I like his LA. His dad, my ex, was a television producer. And when we went to LA, we tended to see very much the industry side of things, and that wasn't of interest to us. And I do not like driving. I don't even like owning a car. I live for the day, which I believe is the day that my daughter goes off to college, that I don't have to own a car anymore. And I just can't. I live in a neighborhood that's very walkable. One time, there was a brief period of time where I I had a car. I had one of those VW diesels that got recalled. And like the day after, and I got, VW had to like pay us significant money for the cars that were recalled. And like the next day, I got my car insurance bill for Baltimore. And I looked at that bill and I said, for this amount of money, I bet I can get everywhere I need to get by Lyft or by Zipcar or by walking or by bus.
Sure.
And it was true. But what was different is that I was still married to someone who had a car, and our kid was going to a local school in the neighborhood that was 5 blocks away. And now my daughter's in a high school that's on the north side of town, and her friends live everywhere. And we just can't live car free anymore. But I will again very soon.
See, that those are the wonderful things in life to look forward to. I would prefer not to have to drive, but living in Los Angeles, I don't have a choice.
Yeah,
and it's what
that's
we
the
do
bummer.
here.
Yeah,
That's
the bummer. It's a car culture, and it's a really hard place to be without a car.
It is indeed. It is indeed. Once again, the book is called Murder Takes a Vacation. It's by Laura Lippman, and I cannot recommend it enough. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, Laura. I had such a good time.
Thank you, Dan. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Hang on for me just a second. I'm also at that age where trying to get... Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Out with Dan. You can find more information about this podcast and its host at OutWithDan.com, on Twitter at OutWithDan, and on Instagram and Facebook at GoOutWithDan. This podcast is hosted by Authors on the Air Global Radio Network, and the theme music is provided by bensound.com. Join us again soon for the next episode of Out with Dan.